My name is Faith Freeman, and I was 34 the Friday. My mother tried to move 13 people into my house. She did not ask. She posted it in the family group chat like a weather report. Friday. All 13 of us are moving into your beach house for 2 weeks. Don't disappoint us. My husband Daniel wrote back that our daughter had a high fever, that we could not host anyone. My father answered, "We'll be there anyway." And I typed back a single word. Okay. Everyone who saw it thought I had folded, the way I always folded, for 15 years. But I was not agreeing. I was getting ready, because okay was the last easy thing they would ever get from me, and by the time their cars pulled into my driveway, I had a locksmith, a spreadsheet, and 13 envelopes waiting. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, the channel where the quiet one finally stops paying and starts printing receipts. If your family has ever treated your generosity like a bottomless account, stay with me. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Here is what 15 years of being the family bank actually looked like, and what it cost me to finally close the window. Let me give you the whole thread, because the shape of it matters. My mother, Sandra, opened it at 8:02 in the morning. Friday. All 13 of us are moving into your beach house for 2 weeks. Don't disappoint us. No question mark. No. Is that okay? Just an arrival time and a warning. My Aunt Ruth Ann replied first, thumbs up, already listing who would take which bedroom in a house she did not own. Then my brother Todd chimed in about the grill. In their minds, it was already done. Daniel, who had been up half the night with Lily, typed carefully. Lily has a high fever. Doctor says she needs quiet and rest. We can't host anyone right now. A reasonable sentence. A true one. My father, Gary, let it sit for exactly 4 minutes, and then he wrote the line that told me everything about the next 15 years if I let it stand. We'll be there anyway. Not, we're worried about Lily. Not, how sick is she? We'll be there anyway. Meaning your no does not count. Meaning it never has. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, Lily's humidifier hissing in the next room, and I read that line maybe a dozen times, and something that had been bending in me for 15 years quietly finished breaking. So I typed, okay, and I put the phone face down on the sink, and I did not feel defeated at all. I felt clear. For the first time in my adult life, I knew exactly what I was going to do, and none of it involved asking my parents for permission. We were at the beach house because of Lily's lungs. 10 days earlier, she had spiked a fever that would not come down, and the pediatric pulmonologist at the children's hospital used a word no parent wants to hear about a 2-year-old: pneumonia. She spent 3 nights on antibiotics and oxygen while Daniel and I took turns not sleeping in a vinyl chair. When they finally discharged her, the doctor wrote out aftercare orders in plain block letters, and one line stayed with me. Rest, humidified air, and away from crowds and secondhand smoke until her follow-up. Our house inland sits on a busy road near Daniel's school. The beach house sits at the end of a quiet lane with clean, salt air and a room where a toddler can sleep 12 hours without a single car horn. So we packed the car and drove 2 hours east to the little place I had spent 12 years saving to buy, the one thing in my life that was entirely, provably, mine, and we brought our sick daughter there to heal. That is the part my family could not seem to hold in their heads. There was a child recovering from pneumonia inside that house. The doctor had written, in ink, that she needed to be away from crowds. And my mother's response to a recovering child was to announce that 13 people were coming to that exact quiet house for 2 weeks. I want you to sit with that, because it is the whole story in miniature. My family did not misunderstand the situation. They understood it perfectly. They simply did not believe my daughter's lungs outranked their vacation. To understand why they thought they could, you have to understand what I had trained them to expect. I have been the family bank since I was 19. It started small. My parents were short on the mortgage the winter after I got my first real job, and I covered it, because I could, and because that is what you do. Then Todd needed help with a car, and then a deposit, and then a lawyer, and then another deposit. My father lost money on a business, and I quietly made it disappear. My mother's kitchen, my aunt's cruise, Todd's second chances, all of it flowed one direction, from the daughter who was good with numbers to the family that assumed good with numbers meant endless. Nobody ever paid me back. That was never the arrangement, though no one said so out loud. The arrangement was that I could afford it, and they could not, and love meant I kept the difference invisible. I told myself it was generosity. For 15 years, I called it generosity. But generosity is a gift you choose, and this had stopped being a choice somewhere around the fifth bailout. It had become a fact of their planning, a line item in their lives labeled "Faith will handle it." And here is the thing about being the person who always handles it. You disappear. You become a function, not a daughter. They stopped seeing me years ago and started seeing an account balance with a pulse. So when my mother needed a free 2-week beach vacation for 13, she did not see a woman with a sick child. She saw the family bank, open as always, and she could not imagine the window would ever close. I was about to teach her that it could. Here is the detail that turned a rude text into a real threat. My family already knew how to get into my house. 2 summers earlier, before Lily, I had let my parents use the beach house for a long weekend while Daniel and I were traveling. I gave them the keypad code so they would not have to wait on us. I never changed it. Why would I? They were my parents. So the code that opened my front door was sitting in my mother's phone and my brother's memory, and when my father typed, "We'll be there anyway," he was not bluffing. He genuinely believed they could simply drive up, punch in 4 numbers, and walk into my home while my daughter slept off pneumonia in the back bedroom. That is what "okay" was covering for on my end. I was not surrendering. I was buying myself the one thing I needed, which was for them to keep believing the door would open. Because the moment they suspected I might actually stop them, they would have moved faster, called reinforcements, escalated. My mother's whole power lived in momentum, in everyone agreeing it was already decided. So I let the momentum roll. I let them pack. I let Aunt Ruth Ann assign bedrooms. And while they planned their invasion of a house they thought they could enter with 4 familiar numbers, I picked up the phone and called a locksmith, and I asked how soon someone could come change a keypad code at the end of a quiet lane. He said Thursday afternoon. I said Thursday afternoon would be perfect. Then I went to check on my daughter, and I started making a very different kind of list. That night, Lily's fever climbed again around 2 in the morning, and the steak stopped being an idea and became a small, hot body in my arms. Daniel ran the humidifier. I sat in the rocking chair with her against my chest, feeling her breathe, counting the seconds between the little catches in her lungs the way the hospital had taught us. She was not in danger, the doctor had said, as long as she rested and stayed away from crowds and germs. Rested. Away from crowds. I looked at those 2 instructions in my head, and then at my phone, still lighting up with the family chat, where Aunt Ruth Ann was now debating whether to bring the inflatable pool for 11 grandchildren. 11 children. In a house with a 2-year-old recovering from pneumonia. It would have been funny if it were not so exactly, precisely, dangerous. Somewhere in that long, dark hour rocking my daughter, I stopped feeling guilty. Guilt is what they had always used, and it had always worked, because I was raised to believe my discomfort was a small price for family peace. But you cannot guilt a mother out of protecting her child's lungs. That is the one lever that does not pull. My whole life they had found the guilt button and pressed it, and that night, holding Lily, I felt the button simply go dead under their thumb. There was nothing left to press. I was not going to disappoint my family. I had finally understood that my family was the 2 people in this beach house with me, and everyone else was just people I happened to be related to, standing in my driveway, expecting to be let in. By morning, my mother had switched from commands to guilt, which is the second gear she has used my whole life. The messages came in a soft, wounded stream. Family is everything. We won't see each other forever. Your grandmother would be heartbroken. We just want to be together. And then, sprinkled through it like salt, the phrase she has always used to close a deal. Don't disappoint us. She wrote it 3 separate times that morning, in 3 different keys. Don't disappoint us by being selfish. Don't disappoint us after everything we've done. Don't disappoint the family. I read each one calmly, because I had spent 15 years learning her whole vocabulary, and I finally understood the grammar of it. Don't disappoint us was never about the moment. It was a spell. It reached back into a scared kid who just wanted her parents to be pleased, and it pulled that kid to the front every time and made her write the check or open the door or cancel her plans. It had worked for decades. It was working on the group chat right now, on cousins who were already apologizing to my mother on my behalf. But it was not working on me anymore, and the reason was asleep down the hall with healing lungs. I did not reply to the guilt. Replying is how you get pulled in. Instead, I copied every message, time-stamped, into a document, not out of spite, but because I am a bookkeeper, and I know that the day comes when you need the record. My mother was building a story where I was the villain who abandoned the family. I was quietly building the ledger that showed who had actually been carrying whom. I made 2 decisions that morning, and I want to name them for you, because they are the whole method. First, this would not be a fight. Fights are what my mother wins, because a fight is loud and messy and lets her play the wounded matriarch for an audience. I would not raise my voice once. Second, this would be a reckoning, and reckonings run on paper. I called the locksmith and confirmed Thursday. Then I opened my laptop and started the document I had somehow never let myself make in 15 years. I called it what it was, a statement of account. Not the money I gave them. A statement of account. Family. Going back to when I was 19. I have every record because keeping records is not just my job, it is the shape of my mind. I have the bank transfers, the cleared checks, the wires, the just this once, that happened 40 times. Daniel came in with coffee and saw the screen and went very still. He asked if I was really going to do it. I told him I was not going to weaponize it. I was going to itemize it. There is a difference. A weapon is meant to wound. An itemized statement is just the truth, arranged in columns, impossible to argue with. My family had spent 15 years telling a story where I was ungrateful and they were entitled. The story only survived because no one had ever added it up out loud. I was going to add it up. And I was going to hand it to them, 1 clean page each, in my own driveway, while my daughter napped safely behind a door they could no longer open. Todd called me directly that afternoon. Breezy, like we were planning a party together. My younger brother has a gift for treating things he wants as things already decided. He talked fast. He said he was thinking the big back bedroom for him and his wife, since Mom and Dad would want the one with the good bathroom. He asked if the grill still worked. He asked if I could pick up a couple cases of the good stuff before everyone arrived. He did not ask about Lily once, and in the middle of it, he let his real reason slip, the way Todd always does. He said this reunion was going to be so good for the family that people would remember it, that it would be the summer everybody came to the beach. I understood then that Todd was not just coming to freeload. He wanted to host. He wanted to stand on my porch, at my grill, in the house I bought, and be the generous center of the family for 2 weeks, spending my money, taking my space, collecting the warmth that comes from throwing a party you did not pay for. For 15 years I had funded Todd's life and let him keep his dignity by never mentioning it. Now he wanted to borrow my home to play the big man. It was almost impressive. I said, "Sounds like you've got it all planned, Todd." He said, "That's what I do." I said nothing. He took my silence for agreement, because he always has. And I added a new line to my mental list. Todd gets his statement too. His is the longest. That evening, once Lily was down, I pulled the accordion file from the closet, the fat brown one I have carried through 4 moves without ever fully opening. Inside was 15 years of my family's finances wearing my name. I am going to be honest about how it felt, because I think some of you have this exact file, physical or not. It did not feel like power at first. It felt like grief. Every folder was a time I had chosen them over myself and called it love. The check for my parents' furnace, the winter I skipped my own dentist, the wire for Todd's deposit, the month Daniel and I ate a lot of rice. the lawyer's retainer for a cousin, paid from the account I had opened for a honeymoon we never took. I laid it out on the kitchen table of the house I loved, and I started entering it, line by line, into the statement. Date, recipient, amount, purpose, in my own dry shorthand. Repaid, no. Repaid, no. Repaid, no. The column of no's ran down the page like a heartbeat. By midnight, I had the first years done and a total already large enough to make me sit back in my chair. This was not pocket change I had handed out. This was a down payment on a life I had given away in installments, to people who then had the nerve to tell me not to disappoint them. I saved the file. I did not cry. I had done my crying in installments too, over 15 years, in bathrooms and cars. Tonight, I was just a bookkeeper closing out an account that should have been closed long ago. The next morning, my neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, waved me down at the mailbox. She is 70, sharp as a tack, and she has watched over the lane for 30 years. She asked how the little one was doing, because she had seen the humidifier steam on the window and put it together. I told her Lily was healing, slowly. Then she said kindly that she had noticed a lot of talk on the neighborhood app about a big family gathering at my place, and she wanted to make sure I actually knew about it. My Aunt Ruth Ann, it turned out, had been posting in a public group looking for extra parking. My family was so certain of their welcome that they were arranging logistics with strangers before they had a single yes from me. I thanked Mrs. Okafor and told her the truth in one sentence. My family had invited themselves, my daughter was recovering from pneumonia, and there would not be a gathering. Her face did something wonderful. She stood up a little straighter and said, "Well, I'll be in my garden Friday then." Which is how a 70-year-old woman tells you she will be a witness. I did not plan to need witnesses, but you learn, dealing with people like my mother, that everything happens twice. Once in reality, and once in the story she tells afterward, where she is always the injured party. Mrs. Okafor in her garden meant that whatever happened Friday would have an honest set of eyes on it. I drove back down the lane, feeling steadier. I was not as alone as my family had spent 15 years teaching me to feel. The quiet street I had bought was quietly on my side. My father called Thursday morning, and my father does not call. He delegates calling to my mother. So when his name lit up my phone, I knew they had sensed something. He did not do guilt like my mother. He did obligation in his flat, final voice, the voice that ended every childhood argument. He said family helps family. He said he and my mother had raised me and given me everything, and that this was how I repaid them, by turning them away over a cold. I let him finish, because interrupting a man like my father just hands him a grievance. Then I said evenly that Lily had pneumonia, not a cold, that the doctor had put the orders in writing, and that no one was moving into the house. He said I was making a scene out of nothing. I said I had not made any scene at all. I had simply said no. And that was the moment I heard something crack in his certainty, because in 34 years I had never simply said no and left it there. I had always softened it, apologized for it, offered a smaller yes to make up for the no. This time, I just let the no sit in the silence between us, whole and unqualified. He said, "You'll regret this." I said, "Maybe, but Lily won't." And I hung up, gently, and logged the call. I want to be clear that I felt no thrill saying it. This was my father. Part of me still wanted him to say he understood, to ask about his granddaughter, to be, for once, the kind of man who protects instead of demands. He was never going to be that man. And I had finally stopped waiting. By Thursday afternoon, my Aunt Ruth Ann had turned the group chat into a war room, and it was almost educational to watch. When a family like mine senses a boundary forming, they do not pause to consider it. They swarm. Ruth Ann posted a countdown. She posted a photo of everyone's packed luggage stacked in her hallway, 13 people's worth, captioned "Beach or Bust." She organized a caravan, assigning who would ride with whom, coordinating a gas station meetup so they could all roll in together. Cousins I had bailed out over the years chimed in with heart emojis. Todd posted a picture of sunscreen. Nobody, in 40-some messages, asked how Lily was. Nobody acknowledged that a 2-year-old with pneumonia was inside the destination. My mother's earlier "don't disappoint us" now had 13 people behind it, a rolling wall of assumed welcome. I understood the strategy even if they did not know they were running one. The plan was to arrive as a mass, too big and too committed to turn away. Who says no to 13 relatives standing in a driveway with their bags already packed? Who has the nerve? They were betting everything on my old reflex. The reflex to avoid a scene, to keep the peace, to fold. It was a good bet. It had been a winning bet for 15 years. What they did not know, because I had let them not know, was that on the other end of that quiet lane, the locksmith's van was pulling in, and the 4 numbers in my mother's phone were about to stop meaning anything. Let them roll in together. I would be ready when they did. Thursday night, I put 2 pieces of paper on the refrigerator with magnets, side by side, and they carried me through everything that came after. The first was the oldest record in the accordion file, and finding it stopped my breath for a second. It was a check, faded from 15 years ago, made out to my parents, in my careful 19-year-old handwriting for $4,000, memo line blank, because even then I knew not to write down what it was for. It was the first one. The beginning of the whole pattern. The moment a scared kid learned that being useful was how she earned a place. I looked at that check for a long time. Then I put it on the fridge, because I needed to remember that this did not start Friday. It started when I was 19, and it had taken me 15 years and my daughter's lungs to finally see it. The second piece of paper was the pulmonologist's aftercare sheet. Block letters, hospital letterhead, rest, humidified air. Away from crowds until follow-up. Signed, dated, real. I put it next to the check on purpose. The old check was who I used to be. The family's function, paying to belong. The doctor's orders were who I was now, a mother with one job that outranked every guilt trip ever invented. Every time I passed the fridge that night and the next day, I saw both. Where I came from, and what I was protecting. I stopped counting the money after that. The total was going to be whatever it was. This was never really about the money, and the fridge told me so every time I walked by. It was about a 19-year-old who deserved to have been protected, standing guard now over a 2-year-old who would be. Let me tell you exactly what was in the statement, because the power of it was in the boring completeness. It was not a rant. There was not one adjective in it. It was 15 years of columns. Every entry had a date, a recipient, an amount, a one-word purpose, and a final column that just said the same word over and over. Outstanding. Not, "you owe me," which invites an argument. Outstanding, which is just accounting, the furnace, the deposits, the lawyer, the car, and the second car. My father's business hole, my mother's kitchen, Todd's endless runway, the cruise, the retainers, the just this once, that added up to a number I had genuinely never let myself see all at once. When I finally totaled it, I sat very still. It was more than the down payment on the beach house. It was more, in fact, than the beach house had cost me. I had given my family, over 15 years, a sum larger than the entire value of the one thing I owned, and they had responded by trying to take that too. I made 13 copies, one addressed to each adult who was climbing into that caravan, personalized, showing what that specific person or their household had received. Not to embarrass them, though it would. To end the story where I was the ungrateful one. You cannot call a woman selfish while holding a statement showing she gave you more than she kept for herself. The math simply does not allow it. I slid the pages into 13 plain envelopes and stacked them on the counter by the door, next to the new keypad instructions, and I felt the strange calm of a person who has finally done the arithmetic she was always afraid of. Daniel was scared, and he was right to be, and I love him for saying so out loud instead of pretending. That night he sat across from me at the table and asked what would happen if it went badly. What if they made a scene in front of Lily? What if my mother did the thing where she cries and the whole family turns on us for years? What if this cost us the family entirely? I did not brush it off. I told him the truth, which is that it probably would cost us the family, at least the version of it we had. And then I asked him a question back. I asked him to name one thing this family had given us in the last 5 years that was not attached to a bill or a guilt trip. He thought about it. He could not. And that was the answer. We were not risking a warm, supportive family. We were risking the ongoing right to be used. That was the thing that would be lost, and I was ready to lose it. We made our agreement right there. No yelling. Ever. No matter what they did. The door stays locked. Lily stays inside with whichever of us she needs. And the truth goes out on paper, calm and complete. And then we let them do whatever they were always going to do. Daniel reached across the table and held my hand and said, "Okay, but I'm standing next to you." I told him no. I needed him inside with Lily, where the one thing that mattered was safe. He would be my second line, not my front. The front was mine. I had been paying for this front row seat for 15 years, and Friday I was finally going to use it. The locksmith came Thursday at 4 and changed the keypad in 20 minutes. I watched the old code die with more feeling than I expected. Those 4 numbers had been a small act of trust 2 summers ago, and my family had turned trust into a master key. When he finished, I entered a new code, one only Daniel and I knew, and I tested it 3 times, and each time the little green light felt like a door closing on 15 years. Then I did the one thing my family did not expect, because it was honest. I sent a single calm message to the group chat. Not an argument. Not a plea. I wrote, "We love you all. Lily has pneumonia and the doctor has ordered rest and no crowds until she's cleared. We are not able to host anyone at the beach house. Please don't drive out. No one will be able to come in. When Lily is well, we'll plan a real visit. Clear. Kind. Final." I watched the little dots appear and disappear as 13 people typed and deleted. My mother's reply came first, and it had shed the last of its sweetness. "You'll regret embarrassing this family." Not a word about her sick granddaughter. Just the threat, naked at last. Todd wrote, "We're coming anyway. Don't be dramatic." Ruth Ann posted a crying emoji, and I realized, reading it, that I had just handed them a clear warning and a graceful exit, and they were going to refuse both, on the record, in writing, in front of the whole family. They were going to drive 2 hours to force their way into a house with a sick child, after being told plainly not to. Let the record show I asked nicely first. My mother called after that, and this time there was no performance left in her voice. It was flat and cold. The voice from underneath the guilt, the one I had heard maybe twice in my life. She said I had always thought I was better than the family because I had money. She said everyone could see how selfish I had become. She said my grandmother would be ashamed of me. I let her empty the whole clip. Then I said quietly, "Mom, I asked you not to come. I told you Lily is sick. If you drive out here anyway, that's your choice, not mine." She said, "We're family. You don't get to lock us out." And there it was. The belief under everything. She genuinely did not think I had the right to close my own door to her. In her world, my house was the family's house. My money was the family's money. My life was a resource the family was entitled to draw on, and a boundary was a kind of theft. For 15 years I had half believed it too. Not anymore. I said, "It's my door, Mom, and it's locked." She made a sound I had never heard from her, sharp and wordless, and hung up. A minute later Todd texted, cocky as ever, "LOL, we still have the code." And I felt something almost like gratitude, because he had just told me, in writing, that they intended to enter using a code they knew was not theirs. I texted back one line, the only slightly cruel thing I let myself do all week. "The code doesn't work anymore, Todd. Ask Mom how that feels." He did not reply. I put the phone down and went to check on my daughter. Friday morning came clear and warm, the kind of beach day my family had pictured stealing. Lily woke up cooler than she had been in days. Her eyes were brighter. She ate half a banana and asked for the beach in her small, croaky voice, and Daniel promised her the sand once she was all better, and she accepted this with the grave trust of a 2-year-old. I stood in the kitchen with my coffee and looked at the 13 envelopes stacked by the door, and I ran the morning like a checklist, because a checklist is how you keep your hands from shaking. Coffee. Lily's medicine, on schedule. The doctor's orders, folded in my back pocket. The original, in case anyone wanted to argue with a pulmonologist. The envelopes, in order. My mother's on top. The new code, confirmed. Daniel briefed. Stay in with Lily, keep her away from the windows. Do not come out unless I call. Phone charged in case I needed to record, though I hoped I would not. I was not nervous, exactly. I had been nervous for 15 years, low and constant. What I felt Friday morning was closer to focus, the clean, narrow focus of someone who has finally stopped hoping the hard thing will not happen and simply prepared for it instead. Around 10, my phone buzzed. Ruth Ann, in the chat. On the road, see you soon. A photo of the caravan at a gas station, all of them grinning, 13 people and a mountain of luggage, rolling toward a door that would not open. I set the phone down. I refilled my coffee. And I waited on the porch of the house I had bought myself, for the family I had bought and paid for, to arrive. I want to say something to you directly, because I know some of you are the family bank too. Generosity that you are not allowed to stop is not generosity. It is a tax, and you are the only one paying it. You are allowed to close the account. You are allowed to protect your own home and your own children first. It is not selfish. It is the most basic thing a person can do. If this is landing somewhere real for you, subscribe and stay with me. The cars are almost here. They came all at once, exactly as planned, a line of cars turning off the main road onto my quiet lane just before noon. I heard them before I saw them, the low roll of tires and the honking, actual honking, as if they were arriving at a wedding instead of forcing their way to a sick child's door. 4 vehicles, 13 adults, and the 11 kids they had brought anyway, spilling out into my driveway with coolers and beach bags and inflatable toys, loud and bright and utterly sure of their welcome. Mrs. Okafor, true to her word, was in her garden next door, straightening slowly to watch over the low hedge. My mother got out of the lead car first. She had dressed for a homecoming, sunglasses up in her hair, arms already half open for the reunion she had scripted. Todd was right behind her, hauling a cooler, calling out about the grill. Aunt Ruth Ann was directing traffic. My father climbed out last, slow and stiff and certain. And they all started toward the porch, toward the door, toward the 4 numbers they believed would let them in, a happy invading army who had never once been told no, and made it stick. I stood up from the porch chair. I did not smile and I did not scowl. I just stood, calm, between my family and my door, with 13 envelopes in my hands. My mother's stride hitched when she saw my face, some old instinct reading something new in it. But she recovered, because she had never lost, and she came up the walk with her arms open and her voice bright, and her sunglasses catching the sun. Faith, honey, she said, we're here. We're here. She said it like it settled everything. My whole childhood was in the way she said it, the assumption that her arrival was the end of any discussion. Behind her, the family fanned out across my driveway, and the kids started drifting toward the side gate, and Todd set his cooler down on my steps like he already owned them. I let the moment hold. Then I said, not loudly, "Hi, Mom." She moved to hug me, to fold me into the reunion, and I took 1 step back. Just 1, enough that her arms closed on air. The driveway went a little quieter. My mother's smile stayed on her face but stopped reaching her eyes. Faith, she said, don't be like this. We drove 2 hours. I said, I know. I asked you not to. Todd laughed, that dismissive bark he uses to make me feel small, and reached past me for the keypad. I heard him punch in the old 4 numbers, confident, and I heard the flat, unhappy beep of a lock that did not recognize him. He tried again. Beep. He looked at me, and for the first time all week I saw actual confusion on my brother's face, the confusion of a man discovering that a thing he had always been able to take was no longer available. "The code's broken," he said. "It's not broken," I said. "It's changed." My father stepped forward then, his voice dropping into the old final register. "Faith, open the door." And I looked at my father, the man who had said, "We'll be there anyway," and I felt the last of my fear leave my body, quietly, like water going down a drain. My mother took over then, because my father's commands had stopped working and she knew it. She turned it into a performance for the crowd, pivoting so the whole family could see her face, playing the heartbroken matriarch to her audience of 13. She said, loud enough for the cousins, that she could not believe her own daughter would lock her family out in the sun after they drove all this way. She said she had raised me better. She said, and here she let her voice tremble, that all she had ever wanted was for the family to be together, and that I was breaking her heart over money and pride. She gestured at the house, my house, and called it the family's beach house. And I watched several cousins nod, because they had heard that phrase for 2 summers and believed it. Then she delivered the line, the one she had built her whole life around, turning to me with wet eyes and a voice pitched for the jury. "Don't disappoint us, Faith. Not now. Not in front of everyone." And the old spell reached for me. I felt it. 15 years of that phrase, the scared kid rising up, the reflex to fold, to apologize, to find the smaller yes that would make her stop. I felt all of it. And then I felt the doctor's orders in my back pocket and heard, faintly through the window, my daughter's small voice asking Daniel a question, alive and healing and safe behind a door these people could not open. And the spell just let go. I looked at my mother, and I did not raise my voice. And I said the calmest sentence of my whole life. "I stopped being afraid of disappointing you the night Lily couldn't breathe." The driveway went quiet. My mother had not expected calm. She had prepared for a fight she knew how to win, and I had not given her one. Into that quiet I did the boring, devastating thing. I took the doctor's orders out of my pocket and I read them aloud, flat and clear, so every one of the 13 adults would hear the words in a real pulmonologist's block letters. Rest. Humidified air. Away from crowds until follow-up. I said, "My 2-year-old has pneumonia. That is not a story I made up to avoid you. It is a medical order. Signed. And it is the only reason we are at this house at all." A few of the cousins had the decency to look at the 11 children swarming the driveway and then at each other. Then I lifted the stack of envelopes. I said, still calm, "Since we're all here, and since my mother wants to talk about what I owe this family, I brought each of you a statement." I found my mother's envelope, the top one, with her name on it, and I held it out to her. She did not take it. She stared at it like it might bite. So I said gently, "It's an accounting, Mom. 15 years. Everything I gave you and Dad, with dates. There's a total at the bottom." Her hand came up on its own, the way a hand does when someone offers you something and your body answers before your pride can stop it. She took the envelope. She opened it because she could not help herself. And I watched my mother's eyes go down the columns of dates and amounts she had never once had to see all at once. And I watched the color leave her face as she reached the bottom line. Then I handed them out. One by one, calm as a bank teller, I walked down the line of my family in my own driveway and gave each adult the envelope with their name on it. My father took his and did not open it. He just held it, staring at me, his final voice, gone. Aunt Ruth Ann opened hers and went red. The cousins I had bailed out over the years opened theirs and got very quiet, because their statements were shorter than my parents' but not empty. And there is a particular silence that falls on a person reading, in black and white, the amount of someone else's generosity they had chosen to forget. Nobody was chanting about the beach anymore. Nobody was assigning bedrooms. The loud invading army had become 24 people standing in a driveway reading, and the only sound was paper and the wind off the water. I did not gloat. I want to be clear about that, because the whole method depended on it. I did not say a single cruel word. I let the columns do it. 15 years of faith will handle it. Itemized, dated, totaled, handed back to the people who had spent those years telling me I was the ungrateful one. My mother finally looked up from her page, and her mouth opened, and I could see her reaching for the old weapons. The guilt, the grievance, the family, and finding that none of them worked while everyone was holding the proof in their hands. That is the thing about a woman who wins by controlling the story. She cannot survive the moment everyone gets to read the footnotes. And I had just handed out the footnotes, 13 copies, in the sun, with a 70-year-old witness watching from her garden. Todd was the one who cracked, because Todd has never in his life been able to sit inside a silence that was not going his way. He threw his envelope down on my steps without opening it and started yelling. He said this was insane, that I was humiliating the family over money I would never miss, that I had always used my money to make everyone feel small. He said I thought I was better than them. It was the same accusation my mother had made on the phone, and hearing it from Todd, standing on the steps of the house I bought, holding the cooler he had brought to a party at my expense, was almost funny. I did not yell back. I said quietly, "Todd, open your envelope." He said he did not need to. I said, "Open it, and read the total out loud, and then tell everyone I never gave you anything." He did not open it. He could not, because he already knew. His statement was the longest of all of them. And into that gap, my cousin Megan, the kind one, the one I had never asked anything of, spoke up from the back of the crowd. She said, not unkindly, "Todd, she paid your deposit last year. And your lawyer." My mom told me. A few other heads turned. Somebody else said quietly that Faith had covered the funeral 2 years back, when no one else could. The story my family had carried for 15 years, the one where I was the cold, rich daughter and they were the warm family I neglected, was coming apart in real time, in my driveway, told by the very people it was supposed to protect. Todd looked around for backup and found people looking at their statements instead. And my mother, behind him, made one last stand. My mother's composure finally broke, all the way in front of everyone she had spent the morning performing for. She crumpled the statement in her fist and she screamed at me. And this is the part I want you to hold on to, because it is the whole inversion. She was screaming, and I was calm. She had come to run this driveway, and she had lost it. "After everything we did for you," she shouted, "don't you dare disappoint this family. Don't you dare." There it was, one last time, the phrase that had run my life. "Don't you dare disappoint us." And I looked at my mother, screaming on my property with my accounting crushed in her hand, and I gave her the quiet answer I had been 15 years learning how to say. "For 15 years, I was terrified of disappointing you," I said. "I gave you more than I gave myself so you'd never be disappointed in me. And it was never enough, and it was never going to be." I let that land. Then I said the rest. The night Lily couldn't breathe, I finally noticed who I was actually disappointing every time I said yes to you. Her. Him. I nodded toward the window, toward Daniel, toward my daughter. "I'm done disappointing them to keep you comfortable." My father found his voice then, one last try, low and stunned. "Faith, we drove out here. We'll be there anyway, you said." And I stopped him gently. "You said that, Dad. Not me. You said you'd be there anyway. So am I. This is my door, and it stays closed." Nobody had anything to answer that. My mother stood in the sun holding a crumpled page, surrounded by a family that was, for the first time in her life, not lining up behind her. The reunion was over before it began. They left the way defeated crowds leave, in pieces, not all at once. Megan came to me first and hugged me and whispered that she was sorry, that she had always known and never said. A cousin quietly folded his statement into his pocket instead of throwing it down, which is its own kind of apology. The children were herded back into cars, confused, promised other beaches. Todd left his envelope on my steps, unopened, and drove off fast. My father did not look at me, and my mother was the last, standing at the bottom of my walk. And for one moment the performance was gone, and I saw something almost human underneath. An old woman who had built her whole identity on being